Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi everyone, and welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host tonight, Matt Filipovitz, joined by my phenomenal co-host, Mr. Bill DeFilippo. Bill, hello, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Had a family wedding yesterday, and then I traveled today to get home. So as you could guess, I'm very tired and my entire body hurts. But other than that, I can't be doing much better.
I was at a wedding 2 weeks ago, and it was the final wedding of the year. So it was one I was really looking forward to. It's one of my best friends who got married, and I got down on the dance floor a little bit. I'll be honest, and I felt it. The next day, I'm and then I traveled the next day. So I'm right there with you, brother. Yeah. I get the struggle of that.
Yeah, the wedding went until midnight, and at about 11:30, they played the song from Dirty Dancing.
Nice.
Time of my life. And I decided at that point it would be a good idea to throw my hands under the armpits of both of my brothers-in-law and hoist them up into the air. And shockingly, my back hurts now. I have to imagine there's some sort of correlation between those.
Well, we
two
can't
things.
prove it, so I would just chalk it up to your
That's
travel.
Right.
But Bill, Penn State played a game this past weekend. It was their Big Ten opener, and a game they won 21-7. The Nittany Lions gave up a touchdown on the opening drive, and then the defense really put the clamps on with one of the better performances of the weekend in college football. It's Penn State's first ranked win of the year. We can still say that because Illinois fell to, I believe, 23rd in the latest AP poll. So hats off to the Illini. It was a nice little win. Bill, the vibes around this game feel kind of off. And the entire time this game happened, I kind of felt like they were 4% away from really breaking the whole thing open. Because, Bill, Penn State dominated this game everywhere but the place that really matters, and that's the scoreboard. And that's why I think fans are feeling, or at least that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, that, yeah, Penn State looked overall fine. You know, they ran the ball insanely well. The defense played great. But again, for a team that I thought was going to go in there and win by 4 scores, to only win by 2, you know, it's hard for me really to understand what that win really was. Because on one hand, it's so clear Illinois never had a shot to win that game. But again, the final score is just a 2-score win, with the second score to really put it away didn't come until very late in the 4th. So, Bill, what are your overall vibes surrounding Penn State and Illinois?
Yeah, I thought this was a great win for Penn State. I feel like amid all that consternation, Matt, there has been this I don't want to say refusal to acknowledge, but it hasn't been acknowledged that Illinois was a top 20 team. They were considered coming into this game one of the 20 best teams in the country. We can quibble with are they actually that? Are they actually top 20? Whatever. They came into this game with 2 ranked wins over Kansas. And then the week before, they went into Lincoln and they beat Nebraska 31-24 in overtime. This is a 4-0 ranked Big Ten team coming into Happy Valley. And Penn State never let them really put a glove on them. It's interesting because the first half of this game, and I know you weren't able to watch the first half live. I caught bits of the first half live. That went exactly how Illinois wanted it to. In every single way, that is how Illinois wanted that football game to go. And Penn State was a missed field goal away from being up at halftime. And obviously, you could turn that in the other direction. They were a missed field goal away from being down at halftime. But the half went exactly how Illinois wanted it to go. And Penn State was tied with them. I feel like there has been a struggle to acknowledge the fact that Penn State had a really emphatic performance everywhere but the scoreboard, and that is obviously going to be an important thing for a lot of people. I think there's this general belief among Penn State fans that you can get away with things against some opponents against a lot of opponents, but everything is always going to inherently come back to Ohio State or a playoff team or something like that. And the fear is that Penn State can't get away with not scoring, not finishing drives against teams like Ohio State, like maybe USC, like whomever they end up playing if they make it to the playoff. And I get that. I don't think you necessarily need to look at this with too much of the whole existential crisis involved. I get why people do, but I think when you just look at this game as this game, Penn State went up against a top 20 team in the Big Ten. And while the scoreboard didn't reflect the emphaticness of this win, Penn State was still able to win the game.
Yeah, and you mentioned that opening quarter, especially the first drive for Illinois. Penn State wins the toss. They defer to the second half. Illinois, a phenomenal scripted drive to start things off. 11 plays, 75 yards. It took I think we pulled up here. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. 5.5 minutes of game clock, essentially. And I don't think featured a single negative play against the Penn State defense that eventually feasted on those negative plays as the game went on.
Matt, I love you. The very first play was a negative play. It was a loss.
Well, all right. Well, I can't see it on my glasses on. I'm not cutting that out. I'm not editing that out. I don't have my glasses on. I thought it said
Listen, here
negative 1 yard.
Here's the point. Yes. Here's the point. For Penn State or for the other team, I hope every single person listening to this takes one thing away, which is do not ever overreact to the scripted drive. Just don't do that. It will drive you insane.
The scripted drive should be your best drive. And to Illinois' credit, and again, it's Brett Bielema. He's a better coach than I think a lot of people, probably myself included, just thinking back to how I felt about this game, even realized. So Bielema did a great job building out a, really responsible game plan to kick things off is how I would best describe it. They relied on what they know. Altmaier did a great job distributing the football. It was just overall a really good way for Illinois to start the game. And after that, they drug Penn State right down there in the slop with them. Penn State had a great opening drive themselves. Warren does a fairly good job of finding his way into the end zone. So I was pretty pleased with that. So after that, again, Penn State really only punted, I want to say one time, Bill. Do I have that right? Everything else was either turnover on downs, missed field goal, or touchdown. So Penn State's script, to its credit, was also pretty good. Execution just wasn't there. So overall, Bill, I think it's a pretty solid win. But to get really granular, Bill, let's start by breaking down the Penn State defense in this game. Like we mentioned, to kick things off, Illinois, phenomenal scripted drive to start. From there, Penn State did an unbelievable job suffocating this Illinois offense. Luke Altmaier came in with no picks on the year. He throws his first pick of the year late in the game. Penn State goes out there and they get the great sack fumble to clinch it from Micah Parsons. Abdul Carter and Smith. He looked like Parsons on that play. Abdul Carter and Smith Vilbert. And overall for the day, the Illinois, Luke Altmaier's final stat line, 16 for 25 for 185 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. On the ground, Illinois mustered just 34 yards. Keep in mind, sacks count in college. Altmaier lost 28 total yards. He also carried the ball 15 times, including sacks. So I was pretty surprised by Caden Fagan, their leading rusher, 13 carries for 64 yards. And Penn State did a great job limiting those two big playmakers at receiver in Pat Bryant and Zechariah Franklin. The two of them combined for 6 catches for, quick math, can I do it, about 80 yards. So overall, this team did a pretty good job, but I think the opening drive really soured how a lot of folks feel this defense played, and I'm not willing to excuse it because I think Tom Allen still has to atone for Bowling Green, for lack of a better term. But overall, Bill, I'm pretty happy with how this defense played.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning. Illinois ran the ball, with sacks added into them. Penn State had 7 sacks on the day.
Real quick, Abdul Carter,
for 30.
He had 2 sacks. He was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week this week.
Yeah, and I think he was one
national
of the
awards as well.
One of the places that hands out. Yeah, one of the national awards. 32 carries for 34 yards, again, with sacks included into that for 1.1 yards per carry. Illinois had Caden Fagan had a 34-yard carry. That was their long on the day. So if they didn't have that 34-yard run in there, they're probably getting credited for like, I don't know, 32 carries and then, I don't know, 20 some odd yard. Like it was a very impressive performance by Penn State's defense. The thing that was so impressive to me was how the defense kind of changed how it operated as the game went on. First half, Illinois drives 11 plays, 75 yards, 4 plays, 35 yards, 8 plays, 33 yards, 12 plays, 50 yards. They were able to get first downs on each of their drives. It was a very bend but don't break performance by Penn State's defense. Obviously, they probably they were a little bit fortunate to have not broken on that final drive of the first half. There was a bad snap.
That bad snap saved a lot of people.
Say a lot, and it really meant that in the second half, Illinois had to go for it. They couldn't just try and lean on, playing the game, having the game state be similar in the second half, having their approach be similar, all that. But also another part of that, if you go back and watch on third down, they were trying to have one of their receivers set a pick. Their outside receiver set like a little bit of a pick for their guy in the slot, and he was going to just go up the sideline, hopefully into the end zone. That guy who set the pick ended up slipping. So Altmaier throws it anyway. They get the grounding, it pushes the field goal back, and they end up missing it. But they still took advantage of all that. Second half, it just completely changed. The way that Penn State was able to impose its will completely changed. 3 plays, -8 yards. 6 plays for 5 yards. On that drive, there were 2 sacks that kept knocking back. 6 plays for 25 yards. That was the drive that included the interception. 8 plays for 17 yards. That ends in a fumble that Smith Filbert ends up recovering. And I think the defense had, 5 of their sacks. 5 of their sacks came in the fourth quarter of that game. So the way that the defense survived in the first half, Illinois was able to, pick up some chunk plays here and there, a little unfortunate for Penn State. They were aided by a couple of penalties. There was that Jalen Reed late hit that I thought was a bit harsh, and that was when I was watching on my phone, so I didn't get a really good.
He was in the white, but it was like, I don't know. It didn't feel like again. It's probably the right call. I get why they called it.
It felt like they were both. It felt like they were both still playing, and Reed didn't have a so okay. And then the Rojas unnecessary roughness, that is a horrible flag for the referee to throw. But you have to, if you're Tony Rojas in that situation, you can't flail your arms out the way that he did. That made it look like you were pushing him. Such a bang play, but it's the kind of thing that they can call a flag on that, even if it's not necessarily like there are 3 or 4 separate people I'm upset with on that play. Tony, the referees, whatever. But I think ultimately this was the best performance that we've seen out of Penn State's defensive line. This was the best performance. Zane Durant had himself a whale of a game.
He's playing. I'll tell you what, he's playing himself off of Penn State's 2025 roster. I feel very confident about that. 100%.
And the interesting thing about this defensive performance for me, Matt, is that this was the proof of concept for how Abdul Carter is supposed to be used. The entire idea of Abdul Carter is that he's this monster, he's a guy that you basically, he's the queen on the chessboard. He's the guy who you could put wherever you want. He can move however he want, and he is going to be destructive. He is the guy who is going to be able to blow things up all over the place. You look at the first 3 games that Penn State played this season. Well, take that one half of a step back. The way that he is able to do that is because a quarterback is dropping back to pass, has to have time in the pocket, and has to be able to throw the ball down the field. West Virginia was never going to be in a situation to do that. Bowling Green were playing so quick, so fast, and with a very good offensive line. West Virginia, of course, also with a very good offensive line.
Did you see that PFF is obviously poop fart, but did you see that Bowling Green tight end is the highest graded player in college football right now?
Yeah, I was surprised. He's Harold Fannin, fantastic player. And then Kent State was, they were dead on arrival. So, and Penn State, rotated in, didn't want to put too much on Abdul or any other starter, whatever. This was the first game, particularly as it went on, and Illinois had to throw the ball down the field, in part because they couldn't run it, in part because that was just how they were going to try and score points, where a quarterback was going to be dropping back, was going to need time in the pocket. In the case of Altmaier, once he started to feel pressure, Zane Durant was a really important piece that he was just feasting on their interior offensive line. He was going to break the pocket, try and, buy himself some time with his legs. And in those moments when you are using Abdul Carter, essentially as a spy, because you can get home with 3 and you can have Abdul Carter just stand there and wait to see what he's going to do. That is when we're seeing the version of Abdul Carter that entered this season before he ever took a snap as an edge rusher, as a top 5 guy on NFL draft boards. This game was the proof of concept: 7 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a forced fumble. We'll see how frequently the game, the approach by the opposing team lends itself to him doing that going forward. But this is the idea of what Abdul Carter and the best version of him is going to be. It requires, again, an offense playing a specific way. It requires a defensive line being able, or pressure packages, whatever, getting home and creating pressure and speeding up a quarterback in a way that Abdul can then get after him. But we saw that when it is all working together in harmony, this defense could do some really special
Abdul
things.
as a spy is such a fun wrinkle. Like, we really didn't see that almost at all these first 3 weeks of the season. And on that final Altmaier, sack fumble, to watch him be that spy and to notice he had the angle, and that closing speed is something else. And when you see it in space, you remember why there was so much concern about moving him from linebacker. Like, there was excitement, but you also remember what he can be as a linebacker. And speaking of linebackers, Bill, I just want to call this out. Dakari Nelson got the start. He played 23 snaps, and I didn't notice him. That's good. This unit needs somebody to step up at linebacker. Shout out to Dakari Nelson. That is awesome. About a month into his linebacker tenure against a top 20 team, he was good enough to be on the field to start. So shout out to Dakari Nelson. Great for him. You hit on Zane Durant already. Hakeem Beamon had a nice play in the backfield. Abdul is what he is. Denai Dennis Sutton is also, I think, really going to start to turn a corner now with Durant and Abdul Carter really starting to become focal points for defensive or offensive coordinators to have to scheme around. In the secondary, Bill, anything you want to touch on? A.J. Harris's pick, great. More or less, he didn't do anything special. It's just Altmaier threw it to him. And Zion Tracy, I'm sure he's gotten reamed out for it. Bad block in the back. Don't do it next time. Good learning curve. Glad it didn't happen in a more pivotal moment. Anything on the secondary front? Jalen Reed's great.
No, I thought they had. Yeah, I thought they had a nice game. Reed, his sack was maybe my favorite moment of the game, just because it was it was a 3rd and 9 at the very start of the fourth quarter. Let me just double check this really quick. Yeah, 3rd and 9, 12:56 left in the fourth quarter. Illinois had gotten back a chunk after a first down sack by Zane Durant. Tom Allen just lines up 7 dudes against their 5 and a running back and says, my defensive backs are going to be playing sticks. Somebody playing the sticks. Someone is getting home. Jalen Reed ends up being the guy who gets home. Defensive backfield, they had a nice game. They didn't get carved up by a receiving, group of receivers, 2 receivers in particular, Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant, who had done a lot of carving guys up this season. They averaged 7.4 yards per attempt, 11.6 yards per completion, weren't beaten down the field. It's what you would kind of expect Penn State's secondary to do in a game like this. And they just a really good game, a really good performance for Penn State's defense on the whole.
Cam Miller should have got credited for a sack. I thought when he was playing the Lion, he came up, he didn't get credited for it, but that was cool to see Cam Miller be able to make a play like that out of the Lion position. Excited to see as that continues to develop, as they continue to develop depth in KJ Winston's absence. So the secondary, I thought, overall held a decent passing attack and a very, turnover reverse passing attack in check, kept it all in front of them and got the pick. So hard not to be upset about it. Bill, one more guy I want to touch on because he's going to get my game ball later on. Bill, Kobe King's really, really, really good at football. Like, I know I said the Tom Allen defense was going to be very middle linebacker heavy just by nature of like how Tom Allen's coached for a long time. Kobe King, I think, played one of the best games you've ever seen him play in a Penn State uniform yesterday or on Saturday. And I want to make sure he gets his flowers because I was very impressed by what he was able to do, again, against an offense that, frankly, can be humming at times. He did a great job rallying the troops and getting everybody where they need to be. So I was impressed with Kobe King.
Yeah, I mean, it was a game where we knew that, Illinois isn't as big and physical and nasty as they they kind of have the perception of being, especially under Brett Bielema. But they were still going to try to be a tough team, be a physical team, do all these sorts of things. And that really does lend itself to Kobe King being able to impose himself on a football game, coming up to the line of scrimmage, meeting ball carriers there. His stat line, 7 tackles, 4 solo. He had a sack. He had 1.5 tackles for loss. Just all over the place. He's had plenty of good games for Penn State in the past. That might have been his best that he's played for the Nittany Lions. Just a really, really good performance by him.
And speaking of really, really good things, Bill, let me tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. Bill, it was a little bit rainy. It was a little bit gross on Sunday. And when I went to the grocery store, I threw on my new Home Field Apparel coach's jacket. And I'll be honest, I was so excited that it was finally like the perfect weather for me to wear it. Home Field Apparel has been our podcast sponsor for the 3rd season in a row. They make some of the coolest collegiate apparel in the marketplace today. Crew necks, hoodies, t-shirts, hoodies, hats, hoodies, you name it. As the weather gets colder, you're going to be looking to add things to your wardrobe, and Home Field Apparel is a place I would recommend very highly. They have a ton of unique designs, including this Nittany Lion script shirt I have on, one of the few shirts I've seen that just says Nittany Lions, not Penn State. I was very excited to add this to my collection last year. And our listeners can get 15% off their first order with promo code RLR24. UCLA is coming up. They've got a great UCLA collection, and they are always looking to add more schools if by chance they do not have your school. So again, it's promo code RLR24 for 15% off your first order. Thank you to Home Field for sponsoring this podcast. And Bill, Penn State's offense, run game was great. Katron Allen was great.
Yeah.
Nick Singleton was great. Aller was fine. Tyler Warren first overall. Where's your head at here? 21 points doesn't tell the full story. I think Sanders Zahedak's 2 missed kicks are a tough pill to swallow. And I'm curious where that kicking competition goes. We're not going to lay into a college kid on this podcast. It might be time for a change there, and we'll leave it at that. Bill, where are you at vibes-wise for the offense? I found myself today having to remember it's game 4 against a good defense with a new offensive coordinator. It took time for Jomo. It might still take a little time for Andy Kotelnicki, but I still think there was a lot of good things there.
Yeah, here's the thing. Parker Fleming at Stats of War on Twitter. He does this thing every Monday where they just calls, "Did we really get beat that bad?" And it's looking at the net success rate in a football game. Success rate is a stat that is basically defined by, are you able to get a specific portion of your yards on first down, second down? I'm trying. Okay. 50% of the yards required to move the chains on first down. So if you get 5 yards on first down on 1st and 10, it's a successful play. 70% of the yards to gain on second down, 100% of the yards to gain on 3rd or 4th down. And obviously your defense is going to be included in part of this. I say that to say this. No game had a
Gap?
bigger net success rate, a bigger gap in net success rates than Penn State against Illinois. They needed to finish drives better. A big part of that is on Sanders Zahadak. There are going to be a couple of drives that there were a couple of drives with 4th down decisions where they one where they didn't go for it in the I believe in the first half. I think they were on like their 39
it was first
or something like that
on their own side of the field, but at that point they were averaging what felt like 8 yards a carry. So like I get the call for it.
Yeah.
Whatever. It is what it is. I would have gone for it, but I'm not the coach.
Yeah, and again, like that was still at the part of the game where Illinois, they were defining how the first half went. I wanted to see them go for it. They decided to punt, whatever. And then there was the one in the second half after Sahaydak missed his first kick before he missed a second kick, where it was like a 4th and 3. Penn State had the ball on Illinois 17-yard line. Aller throws the ball to Julian Fleming. It was just a little bit off. A defensive back for Illinois, Miles Scott, makes an absolutely unbelievable play to close him down and keep Fleming from, limit Fleming to only 2 instead of
3 needed.
3
and Fleming's a big dude.
So,
that was a great play by that defensive back.
Yeah.
Listen, run to the sticks at the same time. Like you had the space for it, get past it. But that was just a great play by that defensive back too. I got to give a hat tip there.
Yeah. So the thing with this game is that even with Penn State leaving a bunch of points on the field, which again is frustrating, it's a thing that I think they can fix. It's a thing that I don't think is going to be it hasn't been a major problem so far to this point. So I'm not super concerned it's going to be a major concern going forward, with one exception in the field goal kicking that I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. I'm not too terribly worried. I can't be too worried in a game where Katron Allen runs for 5.7 yards per carry, Nick Singleton throws for 5.9 yards per carry. And while Drew Aller, I think part of the concern with this game is that the big plays in the passing game dried up. Their longest completion of the day was 20 yards. Singleton by Trey Wallace. Singleton had 1 for 16. Warren had 1 for 15. Evans had 1 for 12. So I think that's probably a big part of where some of the queasiness is going to come. I think a big part of that is just how Illinois approached this football game. They played a ton of man-to-man on the outside. They had one safety really high up to try and take away big plays. And this is where I think Andy Kotelnicki and Drew Aller deserve a ton of credit. Instead of seeing all of that and going, I don't care, we're going to attack this defense and kind of bash our heads into the wall because we have this reputation of being a big play offense. It was kind of similar to the Iowa game last year, where there was stuff that was working, particularly with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and Drew Aller, Andy Kotelnicki, whomever else went, fine, we're taking that. We're taking that all day. The longest carry for the two of them was 14 yards each. So Penn State just churned and burned and picked up the tough yards, kept Illinois' offense on the sideline. And if they have a little bit more luck, if Sanders Sahaydak bangs in those 2 field goals, if that 1 4th down drive where Fleming gets tackled a yard short of the sticks ends in a touchdown, all of a sudden we're talking about a game where Penn State has another 13 points. And if Penn State wins this game 34-7 instead of 21-7, everyone's going to be looking at this going, yeah, that was a really good win against a really good top 25 opponent.
I don't want to be disrespectful to Olu Fashanu. Olu was not a good run blocker. We can call it what it was. He was a phenomenal pass blocker. Olu was a below average to average run blocker. Drew Shelton's a different beast, and he's clearing out the left side at a very high level. And that's where the same thing Penn defenses did to Drew Aller last year. Leave the safety high, make him go underneath. Penn State's rushing attack was pretty limited on what they can do running behind Olu and JB Nelson. With this shift now, with Vega, I know Sal went out for a while, so the interior of the offensive line got shuffled. But Drew Shelton especially is allowing them to really ramp up their run game. And I think that's what allowed this offense to maintain so many successful drives. Again, the fact that they ran for 239 yards and didn't have a single rush play of over 15 yards tells me all I need to know, that this was a pretty severe ass kicking up front. So major credit to Phil Trautwein, major credit to Drew Shelton, major credit to Nick Dawkins and all those guys who had to rotate in. And yeah, Bill, Aller's final stat line, 15 for 21, 135 yards, 6.4 yards per attempt. His first game of the year below double digits yards per attempt, which I was pretty, it's game 4. That's pretty impressive to make it that long with throwing the ball deep, considering what he was last year. The thing that has me excited about the passing game, as much as it can be, they completed 15 passes, Bill, to 7 different players. Guys are getting involved. It's not just the Trey Wallace show. It's not just the Tyler Warren show. Like, they are spreading the ball out to a lot of different guys, and I think that's just going to make them a better team and make Aller more confident. In the event they get into a shootout against a USC or an Ohio State. So I think there's a lot of good to be taken away from this, but you made a lot of really good points that it was a pretty severe ass kicking, but I'll be honest, I'm sure I feel a certain way just naturally that it wasn't 34-7 because it could have been, but maybe I need to reevaluate, Bill, because you're right. If they do make those plays, I'm probably feeling a lot better, but at the end of the day, they didn't. But I just still think that the offense overall played really well. It's just I'm a bit disappointed they didn't finish at least one more drive. And again, part of that is the hate. Part of that is the hate act. I get it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it is that Drew's radar was just a touch off all game. Like, he wasn't putting the ball where he had been putting it. Like a good example of this, I thought, was on the drive with the second missed field goal. In the second half, Drew had one incompletion. It was 6 for 7 for 46 yards, a very composed, safe performance, but a performance that looked a lot like the Drew from last year. And obviously, the thought of Drew being Drew from last year instead of the Drew that we saw the first 3 games this year is going to make Penn State fans horrified, because, again, everything comes back to how you're going to do against playoff teams. But a really good example of how this game, it was one way instead of the other. Drew drops back. He has Amari Evans deep. It's the one deep shot they took all game. He launches the ball down the field, defensive pass interference. Penn State's able to go 15 yard, pick up 15 yards. This is when the game was 14-7. So it was after Singleton got his touchdown. Ball was on Penn State's 43, chucks it deep, ends up going to Penn State, getting the ball in the Illinois 42 after the penalty. If Drew throws that out in front of Amari Evans, that is a touchdown. Instead, while it is a positive play in that it ends up being a defensive pass interference, that's the drive where Sahaydak missed his second field goal. So that's just one of those examples of Penn State's offense left some points on the field in multiple ways on this specific drive. Now, when we know for a fact that Drew has taken a big step forward, objectively, after watching the first 3 games of this season, Drew has taken a big step forward as a quarterback. This was a game where he did not look like a guy who took a big step forward, even though I thought he played a really mature, really smart, really composed football game, just didn't have the big numbers to back that up. And I think that's okay. But having said that, if his radar is just a little bit more, a little bit more accurate, a little bit more settled, he still made some really great throws during there was one early on in the game where he had to have thrown, the ball looked like it left his hand at 102 miles an hour when he just got it right onto the chest of Tyler Warren, I think. But Drew's radar being just a little off limited what they were able to do in the passing game. The reason why I don't think that is such a huge problem, well, I think that was a one-off, was that this rushing attack was so good with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton that we saw that Penn State doesn't need to put an entire game on Drew Aller's shoulders, and it can survive a lesser game from Drew Aller. So again, I know people want more points. I wanted more points. I was really pissed at Zion Tracy for that block in the back because he took away points at a really inopportune time. But I think we can kind of, we would be justified in going, this game had some uncharacteristically not great things from Drew, but there was a rushing attack that was able to lift him up and keep him from having to go out there and have a monster game. And I think that's a really, really good place for Penn State.
So 3 more things I want to touch on, and then we'll go to game balls. One is a play to our players. Nick Singleton, the chip block to impressive catch to trucking a defensive back on 3rd down for a 1st down. That's a guy who I think has officially, gotten rid of his demons he had all of last year. I think that's the kind of play that officially marks Nick Singleton's return to being one of the best running backs in the country. Speaking of Katron Allen, we talk a lot about Nick Singleton, and rightfully so, but for Katron Allen to have a game like this where he just ran in a unbelievably punishing style can be truly demoralizing, and I want to make sure I give Katron Allen his flowers, and Tyler Warren should win the Mackey Award. Him running the ball very well, him having sure hands when Drew threw a fastball right into the cavity of his chest is impressive hands by him. And the read he had where he gave it to Singleton for the 2nd touchdown of the game is a quarterback level read. So 3 things I want to call out. Shout out to Nick Singleton, shout out to Katron Allen, shout out to Tyler Warren. Bill, anything else you want to call on for the offense before we go into game balls?
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up one thing with Sanders Sahaydak.
Go for it.
I don't think Penn State fans totally grasp how lucky they were last year, where Penn State went into. It's not like they just gave Sanders Sahaydak the job because
he's on scholarship.
He's on scholarship. He was a good recruit, whatever. You go into camp, you track all this stuff, you do it over and over again, and at the end, a guy wins the job. Penn State last year, through camp, Sanders Sahaydak won the job over Alex Felkins, who ended up being a really good kicker for Penn State. During his time at Columbia, Alex Felkins went 36 for 54. That is 66.6% of his kicks he made. Missed a couple of PATs over the year as well. At Penn State, after he didn't win the job out of camp, got it handed to him during the season because the guy who won the job, or got it given to him during the season because the guy who won the job in camp, once the game started, just wasn't able to get the job done. And then he ended up taking over from there. After converting 66.6% of his kicks at his previous school, Felkins transferred up to Penn State and went 19 for 24, which is 79.2%, and didn't have a miss inside of 40 and made every single one of his PATs. That is remarkably fortunate. Now, I do think we're at a point where Sanders Sahaydak won the job in camp. Like, anything you read, anything that is said about the kicker room, Sanders Sahaydak was their best kicker in camp, which is why he got the first shot. He got 4 games. He missed enough field goals. It's now going to be whether or not it's Ryan Barker, whether or not it's Chase Meyer. It's almost certainly going to be someone new, if only because I just don't know if you could trot that kid out there again for his own well-being. Like they showed him on the sideline at one point. I think it was on the Fleming turnover on downs, and he just looked like a kid who is shattered. It sucks. It ends up happening to kickers all over the country. I just think Penn State, I'm going to caution you, and I really hope I'm wrong here. Just because this happened with Alex Felkins, where he ended up being a revelation, doesn't mean that either Ryan Barker or Chase Meyer is going to suddenly do the same thing. There will still be growing pains with them, or there will likely still be growing pains with them. I really hope there aren't. There will likely be growing pains with them. We're going to have to get used to it. We're going to have to get used to watching them make mistakes. So I'm just going to preach a little bit of caution. Like I said, I think it's time. I think Sanders Sahaydak, again, just for his own well-being above everything else, even beyond the fact that he struggled to get it done on the field, I would be pretty surprised if they didn't give someone else a chance. I think Ryan Barker got the last chance.
He kicked the final PAT. It was a little bit wonky, but it went in. So, at this point, that's
a little
what
bit
we're
wonky,
looking
but
for.
Went in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think he's you could probably assume that he's going to be the guy who is going to get the first chance against UCLA this coming week. Don't just assume that we're going to get a second a second chapter of what happened with Alex Felkins. We were incredibly fortunate last year that Alex Felkins was able to step in and do what he did. Give the new kids some time if you think that we need to see Penn State make a change at kicker, because he deserves that, and he needs to get used to the fact that just because it's one way in practice, that doesn't mean it's going to be another way in the games.
On the kicker front, Bill, and then we'll go over to game balls. Gabe Wosu, I see you, King. Nailed it. Money. Great job on kickoffs. That's a space I've been monitoring all season long. And again, as long as he gets it right ahead of Zachariah Branch and USC, I'm fine with it. I liked what I saw out of Gabe Wosu. Bill, game balls for me. I kind of already gave away the game earlier in the podcast. Offense, Drew Shelton. Good job. It's a big task to replace Olu. Your kid's playing pretty well. Kobe King, defensively. Best game as a Nittany Lion. Could easily go to Abdul Carter. Could easily go to Zane Durant. But I got to give credit to those guys. And offense for me, I'm going to give it to Amari Evans. He stayed engaged. He drew a really good PI. You know, coming off a day where he set all career highs to kind of fade into the background and still battle. I don't want that to be lost on anybody. So those are my three. Bill, offense, defense, miscellaneous.
Yeah, I'm gonna just take the obvious ones here. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton share it on offense. Both of them were absolutely fantastic. You shouted out that play, particularly with Singleton, where gets the chip, snags the ball out of the air, picks up a first, like just showing off everything that you want Nick Singleton to do. And then, you know, it's something that a lot of Penn State fans have had some consternation about this. I've certainly found myself among them with Katron Allen just needing a little bit of time getting up to speed with how good Nick Singleton's been. Why is Katron Allen getting more carries than Nick Singleton or something like that? Well, this game was why 18 carries, 102 yards, 5.7 yards per carry. By the end, when Illinois' defense was exhausted, he was just a hammer. He had a really great football game. I think he needs credit for that. And then defense, like Abdul Carter, again, you have 4 tackles for loss in a football game. I'm going to say that you deserve the game ball. So Abdul Carter, 7 tackles, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, forced that fumble. There was that one, I think it was a third down where Altmaier tried throwing the ball over the middle, and Carter just basically like throws his arms out and jumps in the air and basically makes it hit him, and like it couldn't, like he was like a lacrosse goalie. Like it was amazing.
That was well done.
So yeah, Abdul Carter, just the game that showed why there is so much excitement about him finally getting it, and it really was a joy.
Any miscellaneous, just a third one, whether that be something off the beaten path that you noticed. I mean, I picked Amari Evans for his 2 catch day because he drew PI. Like, it can be anything that you thought was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give it to Tom Allen.
Nice.
Like, why not give it to Tom Allen? Because he has come under so much fire for the ball. Let's just face it. He's coming under fire for one half of football, and it was the first half of the Bowling Green game. And there have been injuries all over the defense. KJ Winston out for the year. Tony Rojas missed a little bit of time. Now Dom DeLuca is missing a little bit of time. It's just a really unfortunate mix of things. And Penn State's defense was dominant, allowing 219 total yards, 34 rushing yards, 1.1 yards per rush. For all the belly aching about Penn State's defense, particularly, again, after the first half of Bowling Green, Penn State is third nationally in defensive SP plus behind Iowa and Ohio State. There's a little bit of a gap between Iowa and Ohio State and then Penn State, but still, to have the number 3 defense in college football, based on that metric, that mileage may vary which metric you want to use. It's been incredibly impressive. Like I was having a conversation with some friends earlier today that last year's Penn State team was a 10 out of 10 on defense and a 6 out of 10 on offense. And this year's team is an 8 out of 10 on defense and an 8 to 10 on offense. And both of those would be a 16 out of 20. But that second one feels a whole hell of a lot better. My concern is that I undersold this year's defense, because if you are just looking at how they have performed this year, they've been more than just an 8 out of 10. They have been one of the best defenses in the country. By SP Plus, last year's Penn State defense, its defensive rating was 10.5. This year, it's 11.5, going from number 4 in the country last year to number 3 in the country this year. Like, it has been a capital E elite defense
Real
all
quick,
year.
Bill,
their biggest test
on the SP Plus front. We're at about the point now, too, where those last year's numbers are pretty much out of Bill's rankings at this point, right? Or we have about another week or two of that still factoring in a little bit.
I want to say about 6 games. I want to say they really start to filter out, but I don't remember.
Still, they went up. They went up. So
but yeah,
from 4 to 3.
Yeah. So basically, this was an opportunity for Tom Allen and Tom Allen's defense to really put on a show. And after the scripted drive, they put on a show. So salute to Tom Allen, a guy who had the unenviable task of filling in for Manny Diaz, and outside of one half has done a really good job of it.
Bill, we'll touch on a couple things before we get out of here. Cam Wallace's injury today was confirmed to be long-term by James Franklin. On the good news front, Sal Wormley, Dom DeLuca, and Jalen Kimber, they are expected back this week. Again, that's pending practice. Penn State has a off day on Monday, so we don't really know just yet, but that's a good sign. We got the USC kick time today, 3:30 Eastern. We found out the team will be traveling to California on the Thursday before the game, so that's always exciting. Bill, anything there interest you, or anything at all you want to hit on before we send the folks off into the rest of their week?
Just don't lose to USC.
UCLA, right?
Please do not.
Or USC.
No, I mean USC. USC win that game. They're not going to lose to UCLA. I've mentioned it on this pod before. I grew up a big Notre Dame fan, and I've always said that the carryover has meant that there's one team in the Big Ten that I hated as a Notre Dame fan that is in the Big Ten that I could still hate, and that is Michigan. Now that USC is in the Big Ten, I have realized that I still really hate USC. So don't lose that game, please. For the love of God, do not lose that. I think 12:30 p.m. is normally when people in LA are like eating an acai bowl. So fortunately, I don't think it'll be too good of an environment. But win that game. For the love of God, please don't make me have to live in a world where I have to go through a week thinking about how Penn State lost to USC in football.
Well, before that, we have the other LA school coming to town, UCLA, coming to Happy Valley. We'll be back with the game preview later on in the week. It is a 12 noon kick time, so 9 a.m. for the LA folks in our audience, and for UCLA as a whole, which is an absolutely brutal byproduct of them wanting to blow up the Pac-12. So that kind of sucks. But Bill, I'm excited to talk about that game. That should be a very telling matchup for how much Penn State really has grown with their first real opportunity, I think, to put up a ton of points against a Power 5 foe. Bill, that's all I got. You as well?
Yeah, that's me.
Bill, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, jump in the comments, talk about Penn State with other Penn State fans. Thank you to Homefield for sponsoring this podcast. Again, it's promo code RLR24 for 15% off your first order at checkout. Follow us on Twitter over at RLRblog. We're always tweeting fun things throughout the course of the week, and we will be back on the sticks on Saturday to live tweet a Penn State UCLA game that we will really take a deep dive on probably on Thursday. We'll be in your podcast feed once again. So for my co-host Bill DeFilippo, I'm Matt Flipowitz. Take care, everyone, and go State.